September 14, 2005, 6:17 p.m., a woman takes her last breath inside the Texas execution chamber, Frances Newton, 40 years old. For nearly 18 years, she maintained the same statement, "I didn't kill my family," but the state of Texas said otherwise. This is one of the most disturbing cases in American criminal justice history, not because of the brutality of the crime, but because of what happened afterward. The questions that were never answered, the evidence that disappeared, the system that moved forward anyway. This is Crime Case Teller. Kindly subscribe and turn on the notification never to miss our deep dive drops, and tonight, we're examining every detail of Frances Newton's case, from the night 3 people were murdered in a small Houston apartment, to the moment the execution chamber doors closed behind her, and what you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about certainty, justice, and the finality of death. This is the complete story. April 7, 1987, Houston, Texas, around 11:30 p.m., Frances Newton arrives at apartment 125 at the Crestmont Apartments on West Montgomery Road with her cousin, Shalonda Douglas. Frances seems frantic as she unlocks the door. Inside, the scene is unfathomable. Her husband, 23-year-old Adrian Newton, is lying face down on the couch. Their 7-year-old son, Alton, is on the floor near the bathroom. Their 21-month-old daughter, Farah, is in her crib. All 3 have been shot in the head at close range with a .25 caliber handgun. Frances screams, neighbors hear the commotion. Within minutes, Houston Police Department arrives. Officers note that Frances appears distraught, crying, shaking. She tells them she'd been out of the apartment most of the evening, that she'd taken her mother to a church meeting, then went to her own apartment briefly before returning here with her cousin. She tells detectives about a man she knows only as Charlie, a drug dealer. She says Adrian owed him money, around $500, and that Charlie had threatened Adrian in recent weeks. She believes this is retaliation. Detectives begin canvassing the neighborhood. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, no witnesses report hearing gunshots, which is unusual in this type of apartment complex where walls are thin and sounds travel. The crime scene itself raises questions. 3 people, execution-style killings, but nothing stolen. Adrian's wallet still has cash. The apartment is undisturbed. If this was a drug-related hit, why kill the children? Why leave money behind? Investigators pivot quickly. They start looking at Frances. Within 24 hours, the theory changes. This wasn't a drug hit, this was domestic, and the motive was already sitting in plain sight. 3 weeks before the murders, Frances Newton took out life insurance policies on her husband and both children, the total value, $100,000. She listed herself as the sole beneficiary on all 3 policies. On Adrian's policy, she forged his signature. When detectives confront her, Frances admits she signed his name. Her explanation: she used household money to pay the premiums and didn't want Adrian to know. She feared he'd be upset about the expense, but to investigators, the timing is damning. 3 weeks, new policies, forged signature, then 3 bodies. The case against Frances Newton begins to build. In the days following the murders, Houston police focused their investigation entirely on Frances. The search for Charlie goes nowhere. No one matching that description surfaces. No credible drug connection is established. On April 9, just 2 days after the murders, Frances leads police to a location near her parents' home. Inside an abandoned house, officers recover a .25 caliber Raven Arms pistol hidden in a paper bag. Frances admits she placed it there. She says she found the gun in Adrian's drawer days before the murders and hid it to protect him from getting in trouble. The gun is sent to the Houston Police Department Crime Lab for ballistics testing. According to firearms examiner Richard Stryker, the spent shell casings recovered from the crime scene were microscopically consistent with test rounds fired from the recovered weapon. In other words, he believes this gun killed all 3 victims, but there's a problem. The gun has no fingerprints, not Frances's, not Adrian's, not anyone's. Still, the physical evidence mounts. A forensic chemist named James Boulding tests Frances's skirt, the one she wore the night of the murders. He finds nitrites on the fabric, substances commonly associated with gunshot residue. His conclusion: Frances Newton fired a gun while wearing that skirt. But here's where things get complicated. Nitrites can come from multiple sources: fertilizers, food preservatives, even urine. The test Boulding used is not specific to gunpowder. It's a preliminary screening, not a definitive match. Defense attorneys would later argue the test was unreliable, outdated, and should never have been used to secure a conviction. Then there's the timeline. Frances says she was out of the apartment for most of the evening. Witnesses confirm she attended a church meeting with her mother, then visited her own apartment, but prosecutors argue there was a window of time, roughly 30 to 45 minutes, when Frances could have returned to the Crestmont apartments, committed the murders, and left. There are no witnesses placing her at the scene during that window, no one saw her enter or leave, no neighbors heard gunshots, but the circumstantial case is strong enough. On May 13, 1987, Frances Newton is arrested and charged with 3 counts of capital murder. Frances Newton's trial begins in September 1988, more than a year after the murders. The Harris County District Attorney's Office seeks the death penalty. The case is prosecuted with precision and confidence. The state's theory is straightforward. Frances Newton murdered her family for money. Struggling financially, she saw the insurance policies as a way out. She killed Adrian first, then shot her children to eliminate witnesses. Cold, calculated, unforgivable. The prosecution presents the ballistics evidence, the gunshot residue, the life insurance policies, and Frances's own statements. They paint her as a liar. She forged her husband's signature, she hid the murder weapon, she showed no remorse. The defense argues the evidence is circumstantial, no fingerprints on the gun, no DNA, no witnesses. The forensic tests are unreliable, the timeline doesn't hold, and the insurance policies, while suspicious, don't prove murder. People take out life insurance all the time. Defense attorney Ron Mock presents an alternative theory: someone else killed the family. Ron Mock, Frances's court-appointed attorney, would later become infamous. According to investigations by the Texas Defender Service, Mock represented at least 16 clients who ended up on death row. His performance in multiple cases was later deemed constitutionally inadequate. In Frances Newton's case, Mock fails to call key witnesses. He doesn't challenge the forensic evidence aggressively. He doesn't hire independent experts. And critically, he doesn't present evidence of Frances's character, her relationship with her children, or any mitigating factors that might have swayed the jury away from death. The jury deliberates. On October 12, 1988, they return a verdict: guilty on all 3 counts of capital murder. The penalty phase is brief. The prosecution argues Frances is a continuing threat to society. The defense offers little in response. On October 13, 1988, the jury sentences Frances Newton to death by lethal injection. She was 24 years old. Frances Newton is transferred to the Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas, the only facility in the state that houses women on death row. She will spend the next 17 years there, fighting for her life through the courts. The appeals process is long, complicated, and ultimately unsuccessful. Frances's case moves through state and federal courts. Every claim is denied. Her attorneys argue ineffective assistance of counsel. They point to Ron Mock's failures, missed deadlines, lack of investigation, no expert witnesses. But courts rule that while Mock's performance was flawed, it wasn't bad enough to warrant a new trial. They argue the forensic evidence was unreliable. The gunshot residue test was junk science. The ballistics weren't conclusive, but judges defer to the original findings. Perhaps most troubling, evidence goes missing. In 2003, during post-conviction appeals, Frances's defense team requests retesting of the murder weapon and other physical evidence using modern DNA technology, but when they go to retrieve the evidence from the Houston Police Department crime lab, they discover something shocking. The gun is still there, but other evidence is missing: shell casings, clothing, blood samples. Items that were once catalogued are now gone. Some evidence was stored improperly, unsealed, commingled with evidence from unrelated cases, potentially contaminated. The Houston Police Department crime lab was later found to have systemic problems. An independent audit in 2003 revealed widespread negligence, poor training, and mishandling of evidence. Several convictions tied to the lab were overturned, but Frances Newton's case continued forward. In 2004, Frances receives her first execution date. It's set for December 1, but just hours before the scheduled execution, Governor Rick Perry grants a 120-day reprieve to allow more time for DNA testing and review of the forensic evidence. Hope flickers, but the results don't save her. The DNA testing is inconclusive, the ballistics remain disputed but not definitively overturned, and in September 2005, a new execution date is set, September 14, 2005. Frances Newton is moved from the Mountain View Unit to the Walls Unit in Huntsville, home of Texas's execution chamber. The 120-mile journey is made in silence, under heavy guard, long after dark. Officers later describe Frances as calm but emotional. At times, they see tears. She's placed in a holding cell just steps from the execution chamber. She will remain there under constant watch for the next 24 hours. That night, Frances barely sleeps. Instead, she prays. Hour after hour, head bowed, hands clasped, faith is all she has left. Outside the prison, a vigil begins. A small group of activists with candles refuses to leave. The case has attracted national attention. The NAACP, Amnesty International, clergy, and civil rights leaders all call for the execution to be stopped. Frances Newton is the first black woman Texas has scheduled for execution since the Civil War. Supporters argue her case is riddled with doubt, the forensic evidence is flawed, the investigation was incomplete, the legal representation was inadequate. Executing her, they warn, would be a grave injustice. At the Mickey Leland Federal Building in Houston, U.S. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee joins local leaders in a final, urgent appeal. They call on Governor Rick Perry to intervene. He doesn't. September 14, 2005, morning, Frances is allowed visitors. Her parents, siblings, and close family members come to say goodbye. The visits are non-contact. Through glass, by phone, witnesses say Frances remains composed, though tears fall. Notably absent, her husband and children. They've been gone for 18 years. Lunch is served. Frances eats a little. She doesn't request a last meal. She receives the standard tray. Later, she meets with the prison chaplain. They pray quietly. Witnesses describe her as possessing a strange kind of peace. Outside, the protest crowd grows. Signs, prayers, chants for mercy. Local church groups and advocacy organizations rally, convinced her case still holds reasonable doubt. In Austin, Governor Perry makes it official. He will not intervene. He cites the parole board's 7-0 recommendation to deny clemency and the fact that he already granted her a reprieve once before. When word reaches Huntsville, the tone outside shifts, the vigil grows louder. With less than 2 hours remaining, Frances is granted a final visit from her attorney, David Dow. He finds her calm, composed, spiritually steady. They discuss the one remaining lifeline, a pending appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. The appeal argues two things. First, the evidence was flawed. Unreliable forensics, contaminated evidence, a broken crime lab. Second, ineffective counsel during her early appeals blocked her from ever fully presenting her case. At exactly 5 p.m., a phone call comes to the Walls Unit. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled, no stay, without dissent. The justices deny both appeals. Every avenue is closed. Frances receives the news quietly. She closes her eyes, a brief, silent prayer, and that's all the time she gets. 6 p.m., the process begins. Frances is issued fresh prison clothing. She's offered a final phone call. She declines. The witness rooms fill. Her parents and sisters sit together, trembling. Across from them, two relatives of Adrienne Newton watch in silence. Reporters fill the rest of the seats. Out of sight, Frances is strapped to the gurney. 4 lines are inserted. The warden offers her a final prayer. She refuses softly. She's already prayed. The warden places one final call, confirming there is no stay from any court, no order from the governor. The sentence will proceed. He turns to Frances. Do you have a final statement? She answers softly, no. At 6:07 p.m., the warden gives the signal. The chemicals begin to flow. Sodium thiopental, pancuronium bromide, potassium chloride. In the witness room, Frances's parents grip each other's hands. On the gurney, Frances turns her head toward them. One final look. She tries to mouth something. Witnesses believe it's, "I love you," but the sedative takes hold almost instantly. Her eyes flutter, a soft cough, one gasp. She slips into unconsciousness. The only sounds left in the chamber come from the witnesses, her mother's sharp wail, one of her sisters sobbing against the wall. Even in the victims section, tears are shed, and at 6:17 p.m., Frances Newton is pronounced dead. Outside, her attorneys express sorrow and frustration. David Dow tells reporters, "It's a sad statement about the judicial process. A possibly innocent woman died without ever receiving a full hearing on the evidence that might have saved her." To this day, Frances Newton's case remains one of the most controversial executions in Texas history. Was she guilty? Was the evidence strong enough? Did the system fail her, or did it do exactly what it was designed to do? We may never know the full truth, but one thing is certain: 3 people died in that apartment in 1987, and on September 14, 2005, a 4th life was taken. Whether that was justice depends on who you ask. Frances Newton's case raises questions we can't ignore, about forensic science, about legal representation, about finality in a system that doesn't allow for mistakes. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. We're covering the cases that demand attention, the ones that don't have easy answers. Drop a comment below. Do you think Frances Newton was guilty? Or was this a failure of justice? New videos every week. See you in the next one.